All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We are in the session, Racial Equity Grant Updates. If that is not the correct session, you can exit. We won't be mad or anything like that. Well, Addy's got your name down, so we might hunch down, but I'm just kidding. Okay, I lost my mouse. There it is. All right, so we are the presenters. My name is Moua-Leske, and I am the program manager for Southwest ABE down here in Marshall. And I am also the racial equity grantee and the project lead for the racial equity grant.
And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Addy. I am the racial equity grant assistant, and I am here in Marshall as well.
So, because we have a lot of new people here, we our presentation is going to be kind of a little mishmash of giving you the background of the grant and then just giving you a couple highlights from the administrator and the educator survey results. When Addy and I presented at Summer Institute, we did the full administrator. And then for regionals, we did the full educator. So you'll get a little mishmash of that today. So our team is Dr. Rose Chu, and she is our consultant that we hired to help create the data analysis and to help analyze it. And then we hired Kaya on this year to help with our infographics. And then our point of contact from the state team is Jody and Astrid. And this grant started July 2021, and it will end at the end of next June 2024. So I'm just going to go through, there's some goals that the grant has, and there's 5 of them. So I will go through them. So in goal 1 was the racial equity analysis. That's probably the one that occupies the most of our time and is the majority of what we're doing with this grant, is to design, conduct, and report on analysis of racial equity within the state adult education system, utilizing racial equity lens that also includes and acknowledges other marginalized identities. And those are some of the other identities. And we needed to consider qualitative and quantitative means of gathering and interpreting data. And so that's where Rose came in, was to help us create that data analysis. And then 2 is recommendations and actions based on an analysis. So after we gathered all information, what are we going to do with all that information now? And so we've been using our advisory group, which is in goal 3, is to create 2 advisory groups that are going to help us with making those recommendations or any actions that we're doing. So in our advisory group, we have one called the REAP group, which is the Racial Equity Adult and Partners group, that consists of anybody that's in adult education or anybody that is a partner of adult education, such as community education or any of those community-based organizations, or sometimes we've had vendors of ABE that have joined. So anybody that has interest in ABE, they can join that REAP group. And that group meets every 3rd Thursday, Addy. And then our other advisory group is our REAL group, which is the Racial Equity Adult Learners group. And that one consists of any current or past adult-based education students that want to just kind of lend their voice. And that has been probably our favorite part of this grant for Addy and I, is meeting with them every month and kind of picking their brain and listening to what's going on being a student of ABE.
Can I add more about our advisory groups?
Yeah.
So again, these advisory groups have been really helpful in creating the surveys. Through all of the conversations we've had with them, they are the ones who basically formed the format of the surveys that we created. And when we were developing these advisory groups, we wanted to make sure that the groups were diverse, not only in their identity, but also in their location across the state. So we really tried to get representation from every region of Minnesota as much as we could. And we also included students that are in the Department of Corrections. We also have, we've had teachers from the Department of Corrections as well, because we want to make sure we include everybody's experiences in adult basic education. So we've been able to see a lot of different perspectives through these students and through these ABE educators and administrators and partners that have been working with us.
Yes, and with that being said about choosing and making sure that they're from kind of all over the state, Addy and I kind of had a challenge this year because a lot of our candidates were from the metro area, and we actually, I don't think we really got anybody from rural Minnesota at all this round. So even though we did really try hard, but we had some really good candidates that kind of actually came from same program. So we have two programs that have two individuals from there, but we made sure that they had a diverse background as well too. So we have people from I think different cultural backgrounds, languages, what programs they participated in ABE. So we at least, like, if we couldn't get the demographic to be diverse, we wanted to make sure at least the backgrounds of the students were diverse. All right, and then 4 and 5 kind of go together, but this one, all those recommendations, sometimes they might have influence on professional development. So I'm part of the PD committee, which meets quarterly, and go up there and kind of just let them know about any kind of PD that Addy and I suggested should be happening or continuing to happen. And then just also providing open communication with the PD committee, and making sure that any information that we have goes out.
So we've been pretty busy these past 2.5 years. So I'm going to go over some of the things that we've done. So as we stated before, in year 1, C had to figure out how is she going to do this. It's a big project. She couldn't do it alone. No offense, C. So she hired me on as the assistant that fall of 2021. And then she found Rose and got Rose on our team, which has been great because she has a background in data and systems thinking and in education. So she's been able to kind of pull all those things together in working on this project. And we formed those advisory groups. And like I said before, we had the first multiple meetings were just having discussions about their experiences, what they have seen in their programs, what they would like to see improved, just a lot of conversation. And that led to creating the themes of our survey and then the questions of them as well. Everything basically came from our advisory group members. So then later in 2022, the beginning of 2022, we created the surveys, and this took a lot of work with Rose because we had to make sure the questions were asked in a scientific way. You have to ask things a certain way to get expected answers, and you can't have any leading questions. So it took a lot of time working on forming those questions. And when we created the learner survey, we had to put a lot of extra time in that. Unfortunately, due to just resources, we weren't able to have it translated, which of course we recognize as being a huge barrier, something that we would like to be considered in the future. But considering this, we spent a lot of time on the learner survey going through and making sure the questions were really concise, really short and understandable. And we spent time with our advisory groups, both the student one and the ABE partner one, and they really helped us work through and try to get the questions to a point where they thought students could understand them. But we later found out that there was still a language barrier. So we then dispersed those 3 surveys later in 2022. And then along the way, C and I have participated in quite a bit of equity training. Going into the project, we both had a passion for like equity and diversity inclusion work. But once we got into it, we realized we don't know as much as we thought we did. Equity is a huge topic and it involves so many different things, so many aspects of education that we didn't really understand before, and we're still learning today. So in year 2, from 2022 to 23, again, we had those monthly advisory group meetings. And as I said, we dispersed our surveys in the first year of the grant, but then we noticed one of our advisory members that works in the DOC, she let us know that there weren't any surveys coming to them because we had to go an extra step and able to do research on human subjects, as they say, that are the students in adult basic education. So we had to go through a application process, had to write a literature review, give all the context of our research, tell them why it was important. Spent a couple months on getting that application done and then getting it approved by the DOC application approval board. But we were approved, so we were very happy because we had students on our advisory board that were in the DOC. They helped us create these surveys, and we saw how passionate they were about improving ABE, that we couldn't give up there and not let their voices be heard. So we worked hard to make sure they were able to take that survey. And then we discussed the findings of our administrator and educator surveys. So after we worked with Rose to analyze them and go through main findings, we then discussed all of that with our advisory groups. And through those conversations, we created a final review of all the results. And over the past 2 years, we've been presenting on all of these events, the summer institutes, fall regionals, spring regionals. We've shared grant updates, and then once the surveys were analyzed, we shared the findings at them. Next slide, C. So for year 3 right now, we have finalized our administrator findings and action recommendations. We did that towards the end of the summer. We shared our findings at the state's professional development meeting, and that was kind of a big step in the project because we kind of opened up the state team's eyes to seeing that this is a huge project and it's going to take a lot of big changes and not just PD to really address this. We did present the full findings of our administrator and educator surveys at Summer Institute, which was the first time we presented to a large audience. We have finalized the educator survey findings, and we've shared those at fall regionals. And also at fall regionals, we did a general equity session because we want to have everybody on the same page and understanding what equity means and what it can look like in the classroom. And right now we are in the process of analyzing our student survey. We have 430 student surveys from across the state, and then we have just around 300 surveys from students residing in the Department of Corrections. We were very happy with these final counts. So then towards the end of the year, we are going to share our learner survey findings and then wrap everything up, make all of the final recommendations and action items to present to the state team. Next slide, C.
All right. So as I mentioned before, we're not going to give you the full report. We're just going to give you a little snapshot of the findings for the administrator and the educator one. So if you are interested in the full one, we're working on getting onto our website, and we'll share that link out so that everybody can see the actual full report. Oh, sorry. There were 53 responses. And there are 39, correct me if I'm wrong, state people in here, 39 consortiums in the state of Minnesota. And I sent it out to all the state consortium managers. I understand that in some consortiums, there are coordinators and like sub-managers. And so I kind of depended on those consortium managers to make sure that they disperse it out to whoever other leadership roles in their consortium. So we received about 53 back, which we were pretty happy with because we don't really actually know the number of how many leadership roles there are. So there are this many sections in the administrator one. Section A is organizational structure. We kind of wanted to know how is your program set up, because as we're realizing as we're doing this, that so many of our programs are different, even within a program within a consortium, they set it up different. So we're just kind of intrigued to know how is everybody set up. B is student demographic data, and that's just kind of, letting us know what your students look like. And like intake information. And then C was staff demographic data. What does your staff look like? Because in SID, they don't ask what the demographic of your staff. And so we wanted to know that information. D, talent management. So how do you hire for jobs? How do you keep staff? What do you do with staff leave? E was supporting and advancing equity. So what are you doing as a manager in your program to make sure that you are, what are you doing for equity? And then F was just some feedback and comments. And then G was just more about you. And that was, again, gathering demographics about the managers. So there were 31 questions that were required and 34 that were to either elaborate or just provide some comments. So the demographics, 60% are managers or coordinators that completed the survey. White respondents were made up the supermajority. 83% of respondents are female. Very few male respondents, all white. 79% of respondents are between the ages of 45 and 64. Very few respondents are proficient in a language other than English. Very few respondents identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community. So we're not really surprised by this because, you know, we see our managers and, you know, we know exactly what we're kind of looking at. So it wasn't very surprising. So some key findings is 90% agree or strongly agree that there is PD plan to help support staff and volunteers in achieving equitable outcomes for their students. 92% agree or strongly agree that as administrators, they are confident in their ability to lead from an equity lens. 25% agree or strongly agree that staff or volunteer demographics are representative of the students they serve. So not really anything surprising there. As we're going through this, and if you have any questions at all, feel free to pop it into the chat because whoever's not talking, one of us will be monitoring the chat so we can answer your questions. 77% agree or strongly agree that their ABE sites receive adequate support and guidance from local school districts. 83% agree or strongly agree that as administrators, they are supported with professional development opportunities to lead from equity lens. And 35% agree or strongly agree that ABE educators are paid well and equitable as compared to K-12 educators. I was like, that's a really excited K-12 to realize we have exclamation mark right there. So, all right. So these are some narrative responses that we pulled from the administrators that completed this. So overall, the lower pay for ABE teachers due to limited funding makes it very difficult to compete with K-12 for the few licensed BIPOC teachers available. Despite the demographics of our student population, it seems that not much attention is paid to equity issues in ABE leadership decision-making across the state or within consortiums. Most of the limited focus is on students we serve. There needs to be more opportunity to discuss what this equity means at all levels. Opportunities are available and I am taking advantage of them. I'm encouraging my staff to take advantage of them. It is primary volunteer though. I can only require the professional development that I can pay staff to participate in. We do not have the influence to make more systematic changes. And then there is a strong desire to have a more diverse staff and volunteer population that better reflects our learners. So, you know, as we were looking at the quantitative data and now we're looking at the qualitative, we're realizing that some of this doesn't really match the quantitative that we talked about. You know, there was a really high percentage that said, yes, I can leave with equity lens, all that stuff. Then you come to the comments and they said, well, we don't really pay much to equity. We can't really make influence change. I encourage my staff, but I can't make them. And that kind of seems to be the theme throughout the administrative one that Addy, Rose, and I were looking at is that it's encourage. Here you go. I recommend it, but there's no, I require it because obviously, yes, you have to back it up with money. And a lot of programs don't have that money to require that time. And as you know, with my program, I have a few part-time teachers who it's hard for me to require a training when they might only teach 2 to 4 hours a week and then make them go to an 8-hour training. So there has to be that balance. So it has to be a priority in a consortium to make sure that your teachers do that training. And as I'm going through this grant, I have started to make it more of a priority. And Addy and I did a whole consortium training with a consortium. And we have a staff training coming up, and we are going to do a assessment on the classroom teacher, their classroom, the program. But I'm doing that, but I can't guarantee that every consortium is doing that ABE. So So there is no consistency in how equity is being making sure that it's being implemented in our program here. So that's kind of the idea that we're getting from the data here. Some noticings is that the numbers regarding equity are all fairly high, wondering how does everyone define equity? What do these equitable practices look like? Is their impact measured? Now, when we sent out the data, we did have a definition in the beginning of it, just to let everybody know what is equity. And if you're like some people where when you complete a test, you just skip the whole directions and just go straight to completing it because you want to get it done, maybe you missed it. Or maybe your definition of equity is different than what our definition is. Because yes, equity, there's so many different definitions to it. So what is everybody's definition of that? And kind of like what I mentioned, my equity practices are probably different than what another manager does in their consortium. And how do we measure that? How do we make sure that we're equitable? So just yeah.
Just to add a little more, we see a lot of those high results were saying that they feel confident to support their team and to lead from an equity lens. So how is it measured? Are they actually having these conversations with staff and seeing if they feel supported? And then are they leading in a way and seeing how this impacts students? And are they getting any student feedback to actually say that what they're doing is beneficial to the students? And again, in the qualitative data, we see lots of ranges of responses. So as she said before, there's just a lot of variety in how administrators and managers are leading and how they perceive equity. And again, the majority of this survey is taken by white females, and from a certain age group. So there's a lot of that similar lens that the survey is being taken through. So we have to take that into account. And this kind of reminds me of when C&I did her consortium training. We did a human poll thing, and one of the questions was about do you have an inclusive and safe learning environment? Are you welcoming to students? And some members of her team kind of said, yes, we are inclusive. We welcome everybody. We have a smiling face for everybody that comes in. And that's just from their perspective, that they're saying, oh, we're welcoming people, but is that really how it's being perceived? And that's something that they don't really know. So again, people kind of have different ways of understanding equity and inclusion.
All right, a few key recommendations from Rose as she was analyzing this is we need a more systematic approach to planning profession development at the site level and as system collectively beyond the individual level. Examples: communication of offerings, alignment to a theme or goal, reflection and follow-up structure, system to measure impact. Another one is we need to build the capacity of ABE as a learning system to advance the results we wish for our learners. Topics include systems thinking, system change, adaptive leadership, and shared understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then 3 is we need to develop a statewide ABE equity framework that will support a collective vision while also honoring local contexts and needs.
So moving on to the educator survey findings, we collected 123 responses, and this number, we were happy with it, but some people might see it as being low compared to how many educators are in Minnesota adult basic education. But we relied on, sent this to the 39 consortium program managers and then requested for them to pass it on to their educators and their staff. So if they, didn't have time, they might have missed over the email, they didn't get it sent out to their staff. So that was kind of something that we noticed. So the section themes that were created based on our conversations with our advisory groups. A was your role. We wanted to see who was taking our survey. B was about professional development. C was regarding resources and accessibility. D was teaching and learning, and we had two parts for this. Everyone took the first part, but then the second part was solely for people who identified as classroom teachers. So we had some people that didn't take that second part. And then E was about workplace conditions. And then F was general feedbacks and comments. We also asked about their hopes and dreams for ABE. And then G were demographic questions, more about you. There were 34 required questions, but then again, plenty of opportunities to elaborate on their responses. So the demographics of this survey, again, white respondents made up the supermajority of respondents. 78% of them were strictly identified as classroom teachers, while the rest of them were administrator or supportive roles, because we recognize that sometimes administrators may have taken the survey because they are educators too. They go back and forth from that. 76% of the respondents were female. 30% are proficient in a language other than English. About 55% have less than 10 years experience. It was an even split of working full-time and part-time, which was pretty interesting. And then nearly 57% are under 55 years old. So these are some of the key findings. 82% agree or strongly agree that they feel adequately trained to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. 86% agree or strongly agree that they're knowledgeable about equity-centered teaching practices that promote student learning and an inclusive and equitable environment. 68% agree or strongly agree that they feel equipped and trained to assist students that may need special accommodations or accessibility support. And for these responses and the next ones I'll show you, the Black, Indigenous, and people of color respondents were reporting lower than the white respondents. 92% agree or strongly agree that they're comfortable planning lessons and creating a learning environment that meets the needs and skill level of students beyond state requirements. 83% agree or strongly agree that they feel comfortable discussing current events and topics related to race and or racism with their colleagues. 89% agree or strongly agree that they feel comfortable and safe to be myself in the workplace. And again, BIPOC responses were overall lower. So some sample narrative responses, a lot of these are regarding equity and team building. I started my position here in the mid-2000s, so diversity, equity, and inclusion training was not part of the original staff onboarding process. However, there were other trainings in place for new staff to address inclusion. We have never had any discussions regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, or race during my entire career as a teacher in corrections. When I started teaching, this was not considered necessary. ABE has always, by its very nature, been an inclusive program of equity and diversity. Everyone can use more training. There isn't much time for team building with the online community of teachers. It's a very different situation than being together at one site. We discuss if they come up in conversation, but we haven't had any time to specifically address these comments in our site in depth at our site. I work hard and believe my class is inclusive, but I don't have a way to measure it objectively. So what we've kind of been seeing across all of these results and from like the feedback that we got, everyone has the same hopes and dreams of creating a learning environment that best supports students. But we're seeing a lot of variation in how teachers are supported, the conversations that are being had regarding student experiences. And like this last comment, it says that they believe their classroom's inclusive, but there's no way to really measure it objectively.
And I don't know if you remember a couple slides back when I did the administrator about how they said, yes, we lead from an equity lens. I train my staff, But then now you look at the staff and there's kind of a little disconnect of, okay, so, what's going on here?
Yeah, and again, all of those questions regarding equity, the percentages were extremely high for both the administrator and the educator. And this really shocked C and I because we thought we knew a lot about equity, but now we you know, we still know a lot. We're doing a good job with this stuff, don't worry. But we're still learning. There's a ton of it that can be learned. So like I probably wouldn't report as confidently as some of these other people would. So how is everyone viewing equity? Again, it varies from site to site. In some sites, we see that they're doing a lot more to advance equity. They're having those team conversations. They have a system in place to lead their staff and find ways to best support students, while some other programs, it's all just the individual doing what they see as best. And sometimes that's just the capacity available, but there's lots of differences in how programs are ran and how professional development is ran as well. So these are some recommendations that Rose came up with for us. And again, these recommendations may not be what you would expect. They're really big pictures. Equity is a huge project, and there's not just a few things that we can recommend to fix all of it. So conduct further inquiry through conversation circles, interviews with those in part-time positions, asking about why they made those choices, perceptions versus reality about ABE, and why people are doing, why there's a lot of part-time people, not just because that's all available, but for some of our staff, they just want that part-time. Are there insights that could help inform how ABE positions are framed in the marketplace? Create safe and brave affinity spaces for educators' voices, including by their race, geography, subject matter. For example, there's a need to gain understanding and insights into some of those survey responses that saw a difference between BIPOC and white educators. For other comments that span multiple perspectives and ideological difference, there's a need for restorative and healing practices to connect and reconnect intentionally the passion of everyone to do right by the students. Intentionally look for opportunities, even those small wins, to celebrate, evaluate, and humanize the effort of ABE educators within ABE and with the general public. Develop more intentional professional learning opportunities to support educators in some areas that surfaced in the survey responses. For example, we saw different understandings of what accommodations are versus what resources are. There was some blur in that. Develop more systemic approach to professional development. So in communication, in the support system, in best practices, in service of student outcomes. So kind of taking all of that pressure off the individual and having it more as a team goal setting, and how to work through professional development in a way that it's evenly kind of going into the classrooms and impacting students. So it's not so much, oh, I'm going to do this and implement in my classroom while my colleague's going to do this and implement it in their classroom, kind of creating a more system way of carrying out and approaching PD. Connect to the recommendations for the ABE administrators to develop an equity framework collectively and implement it at the local site. An equity framework that is learner-centered and results accountable, co-created with stakeholders across the ABE ecosystem, that provides the necessary foundation of the North Star to stay focused and be less distracted by other noises. We see that equity, there's kind of some divisive comments that we've seen, but altogether, we want to remind everyone that we all have the same hopes and dreams. Everyone in the comments said over and over again, we want to have an inclusive classroom. We want students to feel safe. We want our students to be successful. So how can we all get on the same page, all work together to achieve those outcomes for the students?
Okay, I have two screens and I'm trying to find my mouse and okay. So I understand. So when we created the surveys, we divided into three groups, you know, the administrator, the educator, and the students. And we realized that we're at a support service conference and we did not include the support staff at all. So that's probably one thing that I think when we were kind of looking back at it, that we're like, oh, we forgot one group of individuals that would be really beneficial in completing a survey as well in this one too. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if this grant continues, is to include that group as well. And also, we learned a lot of lessons as we were completing this and analyzing the data, in that There's questions that we could have asked better, like the equity, you know, like it was very open-ended. And as we asked it, we didn't realize it was going to take on a whole different way. And also some of the questions that we asked, even like we're kind of starting to look at our students' ones. We're already like looking at different questions that we should ask. But I think there's just some questions that are hard to ask and complete in a survey. And we would love to do a focus group with administrators, with educators, with support staff, and with the students. That's the only one that we've thought about is with the students, but we would love to do a focus group with all the other groups as well too, because we want to dive in more of and pull up more of the answers of getting to the bottom of why they answer the way they did, because we can't go back and say, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. And so definitely regrets, but that's what we learned, you know, like this, Addy and I, our first time doing this, and Rose has never kind of done anything at this level. She's done a lot of equity work, but she hasn't done kind of what we've done here. I mean, this is really new. We're finding out a lot of states haven't done this either. So we really want to thank the state team for you know, securing this money so that we could kind of start the ball rolling in what we can do. And we haven't really solved any big world problems, but acknowledging it and identifying, say, yes, we have a problem, right? Is that the first step? Is I have a problem, and acknowledging it. And so, you know, the culmination of all the work that Addy and I've done, if it went by really fast, because I can't believe that we are already in our third year. But just know that all the information we have here isn't conclusive. It's just kind of what we found so far. And this is something that needs to be done continuously, because we collected this information last year, and I feel like some of this is kind of already outdated and changing already. So, but yes, we are coming up on our last slide here, and the time too as well. So we wanted to leave some room for some questions, comments, concerns, advice, anything that any of you have. We're going to open up the floor. So since we have a pretty small group, we're totally okay if you want to turn your camera on and turn your mic and just ask us a question, or if you just want to pop it in the chat as well too. Thanks, Brian. I always feel like when the state team is listening to our presentations, it's like mom and dad is coming to support us. So thank you.
Once we have all of our reports finalized, they will be shared on C's Southwest Adult Basic Education website. So look out for the future. I'm sure we'll be sending an email to everybody letting people know that we have these reports done. So keep an eye out for that as the next couple months go by.
C and Addy, I guess I have one question that maybe to kick off some questions. Just expanding on the real group, the learner advisory group. I just see that as so important, and I really value elevating, like I said in the chat, elevating our learner voices. I kind of just would like to get your perspectives, like in terms of learner advisory groups at a state level or even at a local level. What do you see as the future of that, and connecting that with our equity efforts, our racial equity efforts?
I feel like it's something that it should be a permanent fixture. Maybe, I don't know, just like always have an advisory group on the side, so that you can always go back and consult and just kind of get a pulse on what's going on. Like this, I'm just kind of thinking of back, like hindsight with COVID, you know, having an advisory group, that would have been a great place to check in, like what's going on with everybody. How is everybody feeling with this pandemic? What can we do to support, you know? But, you know, I mean, that's already happened. But I mean, now it prepares us for the future of looking forward. Like, what can we do to better provide support for our students? I know when Addy and I met with our real advisory this week, I think one of the questions that like we talked to them about was, have you ever been able to give input to your program that you were taking your classes at about, you know, your experience? And everybody said no. And they were really excited with you in this advisory group so they can finally voice how they feel. And when we shared our results at the North Regional, there was one manager up in Duluth, can't think of her name right now, Addy, if you remember her name. She's a manager up. She took over for Patty Fleech, but she said that whenever they do testing, they always give the students a survey at the same time. And I love that idea because I know how hard it is to survey students, but to do it when they're coming in for something else that's mandatory anyways, I thought that was amazing. And that's such a great idea. And I'm totally going to copy that because that's what teachers do is we copy each other. So, and steal ideas. So I would suggest, I mean, that, because I know some of you give out assessments, but maybe that's a great time to give out a survey and just a quick check-in of the student of, hey, what are we doing right? What can we do better? You know, going back to, you know, what Addy's saying about how some of our staff said, yeah, we're welcoming, we welcome everybody, but what does that look like? You know, does that look like the students just come and they are learning in an environment that is not the best for them? Just because you are smiling and you let them in doesn't mean that, are you welcoming? Are you providing a space for them to have prayer or a quiet space if they need a space to just kind of mentally check in? Or are the facilities, are bathroom facilities appropriate for them? Do you have a bathroom that could be for whoever to go in there so they feel safe in the bathroom? Do you have elevators? Do you have color-coded things? Whatever it is, like, those are more of those accommodations and making sure it's equitable for your students and making sure that they feel welcome. Because all of a sudden you notice your students don't come to class anymore and checking in about like, why aren't you coming to class anymore? So I think it's super important to, you know, like to make our student voices a fixture of something that we should have, that we're always be able to check in. So thank you, Brad, for that. Anybody else? We just did such a good job. We just blew your minds and you're just in shock right now.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. Like I said, some of those key recommendations are really big. It might seem like, oh, I can't do anything to bring any change about. But something Rose tells us again and again is that the process is part of the treatment. There may not be one clear solution in sight, but all of these conversations, all of getting this data into people's minds, it's part of the treatment. So you being here is part of the treatment.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much to our wonderful presenters, and thanks for being here. I just chatted out the next session starts at 11. You'll find the link in the agenda, and that link, the link to the agenda is in the chat. So thanks once again, everyone, for being here.